I'd like to welcome everybody to the Iowa State University Extension Dairy Team webinar series. Today we'll be talking with Dr. Victor Cabrera on the economics of breeding for more dairy replacements. Dr. Cabrera is a dairy specialist out of UW-Madison and combines applied research with an interdisciplinary approach and delivers very useful information for producers. We appreciate him taking the time to present this information today. So as I always say, Dr. Cabrera, the podium is yours.
Great. Thanks, Fred, and thanks everyone in the team of Iowa for inviting me and have this opportunity to share some ideas and work we have been doing in my lab here in Wisconsin. Hopefully these are very kind of be helpful and actionable. That's I think an important word, something that you can apply. And as you will see throughout the presentation, there are some tools that you can actually use with your own data and make farm specific for your own conditions. So the main topic I have been asked to deliver today is about the economics of breeding, but always having in mind the production of enough replacements, which, as we know, has become a little of an issue in the dairy industry. So without further ado, let's move on. This is about the roadmap of what I want to cover today and give a little of rationale and explanation why we're going towards this process. So just a little background, as we all know, thanks to our colleagues and the good work of the farmers, reproduction has improved, not only in the number of service cows, but also in the fertility or the outcomes of the reproduction. So we have had a improved reproduction overall in the last years in the industry. And so there has been a time of oversupply of replacements. That has been part of the situation. But that always is connected with the economic uncertainty, and there is a lot of variability in the market and in the prices. And I mean, unfortunately, there is always this uncertainty about the net return, and margins become depressed. So there are always on the look for new opportunities to make extra money in the industry. So there is that on one side, and on the other side, there is an opportunity, and this is already probably a decade or more in the industry, the opportunity of use beef semen to produce extra value crossbred calves. And that in addition to give extra net return to the farmers, increases the selection intensity and potentially shorten the generational gap between one animal and the offspring. And that in genetic terms somehow means genetic improvement or faster genetic progress. So, well, because when we use the beef semen, we have the opportunity, or potentially it will somehow prompt us to use more sex semen to produce the replacements. So that combination of sex and beef semen has its benefits, not only in the economic side, but also from the standpoint of view of genetic progress of the farm. So could be a profitable strategy, and I think we all know nowadays it is a profitable strategy. Many farmers, most of the farmers I know in Wisconsin we work with, they are using some level of beef and sex semen. Now the question comes, what's the right amount? What's the optimal amount of beef and sex semen, and how to most optimally used? Because, as I said at the beginning on this slide, excessive use of beef semen could actually become an issue because we may not have enough replacements. So there is a trade-off there, and sometimes delicate balance. And we need systematically quantify and hopefully optimize. And so some of the tools I'm gonna introduce you today hopefully will help in this area of decision making. So the objective is analyze the economic outcomes as well as the reproductive outcomes and the production of replacements. Find the replacement needs first, and then do an analysis of what should be the best level of use of sex and beef semen on a farm, and hopefully on a particular farm under the conditions of the farm, not only from the performance of the farm, but also the market situation around the farm. And so we have a short-term analysis and a long-term analysis, as you will see, and these are based in some publications that are out there, easy for you to find if anyone wants more information or deeper information of what I'm gonna be presenting today. So to be a little more specific, the short term will use a tool that we call the Premium Beef on Dairy Decision Support Tool. I'm going to talk about more in a moment, so leave it there for now. And it calculates the income from calves over semen cost. And then we're going to talk about also a larger model and a way to do more long-term decision making using this new and hopefully one that's going to become much more known, the RUFAS, the Ruminant Farm System Model. I'm going to introduce that as well to you. I think it's an interesting concept idea and an interesting project, a large project actually in the US, and something that, as I said, likely will become much more known in our industry. And this calculates the net return of different reproductive programs using different levels of beef, sex semen, and even conventional semen. So we're going to use those two things. We're going to do a little different analysis, but complementary analysis, and reach out some conclusions and some take-home messages for you to apply. But more important than the take-home messages in general would be the opportunity to use these tools for your own decision making. But before going to that, I wanted to introduce you what I would say an intermediary tool that I think it could be very useful to calculate the replacement needs on any farm. Trying always, many of the tools that are available, you will see at the end of the presentation where you can find out the tools, but here you have a brief snapshot. dairymgt.info is the main website. There is a section called tools, and in this tool specifically happens to be in the financial section because it has a cash flow, very interesting module. But the part I want to emphasize today is the hair structure simulation of this tool, which actually based on only a few input, the yellow cells here, based on your farm specific conditions, the tool can give you the level of replacements that you will require to maintain a herd size stable, which normally is the way dairy farms operate. Like in this case, for example, if we have a farm of 1,000 adult cows, and for example, 30% replacement rate, and all the other factors that you can see in the yellow cells, the first thing that the tool will do when we estimate the farm is performing a steady state, like being stable, this is the population demographics you will see in this graph here. You see on the x-axis the heifer age or cow month after calving. Like for example, this is in blue, the heifers that we would have at different ages. The green would be the later lactations. We have the first and second lactation. So you can have an idea how the population will look like under these conditions on this farm. And based on that, actually, it will give you an estimate of how many calves and heifers of different ages you would need. And you can change the conditions. And you can project, for example, to a longer term, in this case, to 60 months, for example, and I'm connecting the heifers I'm producing with the cows. And if that's the case, and according to my conditions, there seems to be that I'm producing more heifers than what I need. And that's easily reflected in this graph that the number of heifers and all the lactations will be increasing across time. Actually, if you see down here, the table, you will see you started with 1,000 cows. Now you have 1,441 adult cows after 60 months if you keep all your conditions stable. That's obviously not what that's going to happen, but it's a projection based on that. And that's telling you you have an opportunity to use, for example, beef semen to have less replacements out of the farm, and that way still maintain the herd size and have extra income by using that, for example, right? And this is, for example, what we did here. Rather than having a heifer calf born at 47%, which is normally used in conventional semen, our heifer calf born in general could be 38%, which would be the combination of using beef semen and maybe sex semen as well. So overall, we have that, and our herd in 60 months, again, as in the previous case, would be a little more than 1,000. It would be around 1,000, so it's still stable. And then it will give you an idea what the structure of your heifers and calves would be, and also the structure, how it would be at different lactations, how many cows we will have in the first lactation that are non-pregnant, how many are pregnant, how many are dry, etc., etc. So it's a good first step. I really encourage you to play with this tool, enter a little bit of your data. As you can see, there is not a lot that's needed, but based on that, you can have a good idea what's the level of your herd demographics and what possibilities you have to change that according to reproduction protocols. So now let's move on to the premium dairy beef program, as I mentioned before, like the short-term analysis. And again, this would be in the website in the reproduction section. And this is a very interesting calculator, but very easy to use. Once again, the yellow cells would be the inputs that you would need to enter. We're going to go a little more detail in a moment. But at the end, what this will calculate is two important things. One is the income from calves over semen cost I mentioned before, ICOSC. So there is a value here. If it is positive, that's good. So you're making more money than what you're investing with this new alternative. And then the other thing that calculates is the calves balance. So it is the difference between the produced replacements, dairy replacements, minus the required. And in this case, it happens to be 7 positive, means that you could still use, for example, a little more beef semen. The ideal number here would be 0, not negative, not positive. So you are stable in your herd. And that will likely, if we decrease this number to 0, for example, it's likely it's going to increase your ICOSC because you will have more income from beef semen, crossbred calves, for example. But there is always a trade-off, obviously, in every decision. So we use this tool, and we published this as a Journal of Dairy Science Communications a couple of years ago. So you may want to look at that if you have interest in going deep. But I just kind of give you a quick overview what we did at that point. Basically, we use 3 different levels of reproduction, high to low. I'm highlighting the medium here. And we set up a farm with specific conditions, and we set up market conditions at the time that were available. Okay, so based on that, actually, we studied a number of scenarios of using different levels of sex semen and different levels of beef semen. So you can see there was a situation of not sex semen used. By the way, not sex semen used, and all the way using sex semen to even to the first breeding of the second lactation cows, right? There was a top option as well, in which it was using 2 breedings with the Heifers, sex semen, and the first breeding with the top 20% genetics of the adult cows. Okay, so large variability of using sex semen, but on top of that, for the Heifers, those Heifers not using sex semen were using conventional. So the option of use beef semen on Heifers was not available, but the option of using beef semen on adult cows was heavily available. And it ranged from using none, 0%. So all the rest of the breedings that were not done with sex semen were done with conventional, and all the way to the other extreme, in which all the other breedings that were not done with sex semen were done with beef semen. So no conventional semen. Indeed, as you may will be very well aware, many farms are operating that way, using only sex semen and beef semen and not conventional at all. So, and everything in between, obviously, as we know. And so based on that, we came up with this main result. And I'm gonna spend a little bit of time here because I think it's important to highlight what we found. And I wanna remind you that this is 2022, so the market conditions were different at that point, right? So, but in this 3-dimension graph, has a lot of data, but I think it's easy to understand if we go a little bit into the details. So on this axis here, on this vertical axis, we have the ICOSC I presented already. So we want the highest ICOSC as we can, income from cows over semen cost. On this axis here, down here, we have the level of use of sex semen from not use, as I mentioned before in the previous slide, all the way to 2C in the first breeding of the second lactation. And on this side, we have the use of beef semen from 0, no use of beef semen, and all the way to 100% of beef semen. And now, as I mentioned, the bars represent the income from cows over semen cost, the ICOSC, but the circles, the solid circles or the cubes here represent either the surplus of replacements. Actually, all what is inside this circle here means all the situations in which we have additional replacements, we have surplus of replacements, and those that are outside of the circle are situations in which we have deficit of replacements, okay? You may wonder, even in this case, for example, I have a lot of deficit of replacements when I use a lot of beef semen and non-sex semen, for example, in this situation. But my ICOS is the highest possible in this situation. Yes, that's true. In this, the assumption was that you don't have replacement, you will buy replacements. And we all know that's a not very real situation because many times you do not have the replacements available to buy at the moment you need to buy them. And also many farmers will be reluctant to buy a lot of replacements outside of the farm. They will prefer to produce the replacements within the farm, in-farm produce replacements. So that's the situation in which we will be in the red circle here. So basically, I would say we would like to concentrate in the situations within the circle, and within the circle, I will try to find the maximum ICOS, which is the one I'm pointing here. And if we follow this carefully, that happens when we use actually a lot of sex semen, and at the same time, we use a lot of beef semen. Actually, it's even breeding with sex semen at the first breeding of the second lactation, and using to the rest of the cows with beef semen. That's a very good situation. In that situation, we have more than 2,000, about more than 2,000 of ICOSC, extra net return with this situation, right? Market conditions 2 years plus ago. Now I rerun this analysis with these situations that are more current, crossbred at $700, which is much better than what used to be at that point, and dairy 225. Now you can change these. You have the tool available to your own conditions in your own situations. But based on these values, I mean, there is no doubt, even in this situation, there will always be a very high positive value. And actually, we will have a very high value by using the situation we mentioned before, breeding sex semen quite a bit up to second lactation, and a lot of beef semen. So the opportunity remains there, and providing that we can, depending on the level, this is actually with about 20% 21-day pregnancy rate. We know nowadays 20% 21-day pregnancy rate is not rare in the industry. Actually, it would be in the low side of the reproductive performance. So I think the opportunity remains, but we need to always be careful to keep up and maintain the herd size when we do this kind of decision making. The other thing I want to share with you is that there is this center in Missouri, is the Food and Agricultural Projection Research Institute, I believe is the name, is from the USDA. And what they do is actually look at the meat prices and project to the future. Actually, you can see here until 2024, the fed steer price in green, and in blue, the feeder steer price here. What you can see here clearly in the future, actually these projections seem to be very, very good actually. The point is both, which are very related to the use of crossbred dairy animals, are going up, and even though they will decrease later, seem to be close to 2028 or around, they will be higher than what they are now. That's the point. So the important take-home message of this slide, of this graph, is that there seems to be that the opportunity of keep breeding to crossbred will remain here at least for the next 10 years and probably more. So it is here to stay. And that prompts the decision of always look a tool like I just showed in producing enough replacements and have the best value by using beef semen together, likely with the use of sex semen, to produce enough replacements. So brief conclusions about this short-term analysis. The use of sex and beef semen, it is heavily related to reproductive performance, but as I mentioned as well, if you have a decent reproductive performance of at least 20% pregnancy, 21-day pregnancy rate, I think there are very good opportunities to do this kind of decision making. The other thing that's important to mention is this analysis we have done, it is only for a year, let's say, for a breeding period. So it will need to be rerun as soon as you want to change your decision making, and as soon as market and prices change and conditions change. So the idea is, if you use this tool, my recommendation would be to use constantly, at least once a month, to drive your decisions. The other thing that's clear in my mind, based on this analysis, is the moderate use of beef semen together with sex semen will produce enough replacements, given that we have a decent reproductive performance on the farm. And obviously, there is a trade-off between maximizing the ICOSC, the maximum value of the crossbred animals, and still produce enough replacement. So we need to keep that into consideration every time we do this kind of analysis. We don't want to run into the situation of trying to simply talk about higher ICOSC and be in the risk of not having enough replacements from within the farm. Okay, so now let's move on to the RUFAS, Ruminant Farm System Models. If you haven't seen these, I promise you, you will be introduced to this anytime soon, because it is a large project. I think at the moment there are more than 50 researchers across the US working on these different modules. There is the animal module, manure module. This is a whole dairy farm system simulation. It happens, this will replace the Farm ES, that's the one used to do the assessments for environmental assessments for dairy farms, and that seems to be happening this year, later this year. My lab has been heavily involved in the development of the animal module. And that's what I want to introduce you today. We're going to use the animal module because it has a lot of deepness in the simulation, and we can do long-term analysis for different reproductive programs using different type of semen to do what's going to be the assessment in the long term in both replacements needed, produced on the farm, and the economics out of there. Okay, so just to give you a little more briefly background of the RUFAS, what it has, it simulates different groups of animals. It simulates every single animal from the beginning to the end of their life, and it continues with the replacement. And in every step, it calculates the economics, the benefits of the animal, the production, and the cost that the animal incurs, and it aggregates at the herd level or the group level. So it is a very comprehensive model to do that. So we can do reproductive programs very efficiently. We can apply reproductive programs by groups of animals. So if we want, we can do at the animal level even. And this is the first time, for example, that has been published the use of different reproductive programs together to heifers and cows, not together the same program, but the fact that the reproductive program that you do on the heifer will affect your population of cows, and the cows will have a different reproductive protocol as well. So in the past, these studies have been done separately. But anyway, in this case, the emphasis was on using different type of semen under different reproductive protocols, whether it is using estrus detection only, synchronization and estrus detection in heifer, and time II, and different reproductive programs as well for the cows. Okay, I don't want to go into all the details of these reproductive programs, but just to mention that they come from the standard reproductive protocols suggested by the DCRC, the Dairy Cattle Reproductive Council in the US. And then based on that, we tested these different reproductive protocols or scenarios, right? In which we use beef and sex semen from low to intense, and we set up a reproductive performance where it would be high or moderate. And you will see what the high means. High means about 60% conception rate at first heifer breeding and 55% conception rate at first lactation cow breeding. And there would be variation in different breedings, obviously. And the moderate would be 55% of conception rate at first breeding and 50% conception rate at the first lactation cow breeding, right? And then you can see as well the use of sex and beef semen. The intent was to use a lot of female sex semen, even the first and second lactation, and no use of conventional semen. So somehow similar to what we have seen in the previous short-term scenario. And the law, to go to the other extreme, is use less sex and beef semen and a little more of the conventional semen. Okay, so you can see that more in detail, but I want to move on that we enter all the values we found the best at that moment for the different use of costs on the reproduction program and the economics of the farm or the herd in general. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the details. This can be changed in other runs, in other analysis, but just for the purpose of doing that, because here the important here is not specifically each one of those numbers, but the differences that we will find out. We need to think that all these numbers apply the same to the different scenarios that we tested. And so therefore we are interested in the difference, which are the best scenarios, right? And in each case, for the high and the moderate, we have the base, which are highlighted here in bold. And then we have the differences that we obtain with intense, medium, or low. And so for example, in this case, 134 means 134 more dollars with the intense scenario compared to the base scenario, and this in the milk. And the intense also had $2 more per cow per year of net return in the slaughter value compared with the base and the like, right? So one thing that's very clear here, as you can see, if we look at the net return at the very end, all the numbers that are below the bold one are higher, so are positive, meaning that whether we use low, medium, or intense, whether it is with the high or moderate, those would be better than the base scenario. Meaning, and I think that's a very strong conclusion, using sex and beef makes sense. If we have, once again, a decent reproductive performance on the farm. They are always better. We have a better economic return, even though in some cases, well, not in some cases, in most of the cases, because we are using sex semen, we will have a higher investments on those kind of reproduction protocols. But the other thing that the tool, this RUFAS give you, it's very nicely, it gives you a whole population distribution. For example, in each one of the scenarios, you can see the percentage of first lactation cows, for example, how the distribution changes. As you can see, for example, you will have more first lactation cows with this scenario, which is the blue, the moderate low, for example, right? As we know, percentage of first lactation cows, we want to have less of them. That means that the longevity is longer on the farm, right? So that happens, for example, with the base scenario on the high reproduction, and also with the high in the moderate scenario. But as we know, using sex and beef semen will decrease somehow our reproductive performance overall, and that will prompt to have a little more cows in the first lactation. So we just need to be mindful of that. The same, we can see the number of young animals, and we can see the number of reproductive colonies. And that's also interesting because using sex and beef semen will tend to have more colonies than not using them. But even then, we will have a higher net return at the end. But we need to keep that information into account when we make decisions. So overall, the conclusions, and I think this is very strong in my mind, all study scenarios using beef and sex semen had a better net return than all conventional semen scenario. And I mean, it's for a reason. The industry is tending towards that. Most of the farmers are doing that. Some level of beef and sex semen is being used on almost every farm I know nowadays. And many of them are even using only sex and beef semen and not conventional semen anymore. And then in our case, in this specific study, intense scenarios only use sex and beef semen had the best net return. But that would change, that would depend on the specific conditions of the market and on the farm. And what were the most important factors? Calf selling, and here is referred to the crossbred calves. That's an important income stream nowadays. And milk changes were very important as well, right? That's depending on when we're getting the cows pregnant, what part of the lactation we're taking best advantage, and that depends on our reproductive performance, obviously, okay? And greater sex and beef semen associated with greater proportion of young stock, first lactation, and reproductive colonies, as I mentioned before. And again, I think that's important to keep into consideration when we make these decisions. That's gonna happen. I mean, overall, using sex and beef semen will decrease our reproductive performance slightly. Okay? So overall, one thing I wanna emphasize, and I mentioned this at the beginning, I invite you and encourage you actually to explore dairymgt.info. Very easy to remember. You can just Google it, dairy management in Wisconsin, It's openly available. There are more than 40 different decision support tools that you can use. Many of those are related to reproduction, and the ones I have presented, except the Rufus. The Rufus is still under development, and that's, as I mentioned, a large model. All the other tools I presented are available there. Okay, and finally, I introduced the Rufus as something to keep an eye on it. I think large and nice developments are coming up out from that project. And this is my last slide, and just want to leave this here and hopefully open for questions if you would have. But I want to leave this because you can see here a number of different websites and links you may want to check out for additional information related to what we have talked today. So I have seen some comments. I think there are questions I haven't.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Cabrera. Steve asked, what is the impact of fewer heifers on the generation gap?
If we have, good question to start with. Thanks, Steve, for bringing that up. As long, this would be my take. As long as we have enough replacements, I do think there would be, and we are doing a good selection to our breeding, I don't think it will be detrimental to our genetic progress. I don't know if the question is related to the fact of selecting calves or heifers using, like, for example, genomic test, which would be an option that will give you an opportunity, an additional opportunity to keep only the best animals to reach the production side. That's an option, and that's something we are thinking as well to connect with the sex and beef women. But in general, what I would say, having less calves and heifers, as long as are enough for the herd, I don't think will be detrimental to the genetic progress.
Victor, do you have a feel for, like, we're getting a lot of questions right now, I guess, on just the cost of heifers. You know, some of these going over $4,000 a head with these relative milk prices, whether it be organic milk prices or conventional milk prices. You know, what's kind of the price break-even point what you can afford to pay for them at these milk prices and still make money on them?
That's a very good point.
Any tools out there?
Not at the moment. Well, we have something that is like a cost of raising heifers and using whether it is the conventional or the speed method to raise the heifers. But that's a big issue, the one you mentioned, Larry, because what happens is at such high price, it's very difficult to find replacements in the market, and that prompts again. And I think in certain way, this presentation was inspired by the fact that we want to produce enough replacements from the herd. So the break-even will be very high. And in the past, we calculated, for example, we need close to 1 lactation to pay for the raising of the heifer, for example. At those prices, at the current prices, and not only the high prices, but the difficulty of the supply of having those available, it would be even more than that. So that's.
So would it get up to the 2 lactations you need to pay for it at these prices, you think, or 1.7?
It could be.
Make a guess.
I don't think it will go all the way to 2 lactations, but it will be very well into the second lactation. I would put it that way. Yes.
Okay.
We've got a question from Jim, and I'm going to ask him to go ahead and read that himself.
Okay, Victor, my question is, if you're working with a farm and they're planning on expanding and they just need uteruses and needs a lot of calves. So say they're expanding from 500 cows to 1,000 cows and they're not going to expand till 2027, but they want to know, can they internally make enough heifers to grow into that facility? Does your models do that? can you
Yes,
in and the next question is, will it automatically do a cow flow across those multiple years? So if I look over the next 3 or 4 years
yes,
and I want to expand, can I do a cow flow with that?
yes, you can. Yes,
Okay.
thanks for the question, Jim. This would, I will refer, and let me go quickly back to the tool I presented at the beginning. The dairy herd structure simulation will provide you this.
Okay.
Will give you the projection you want to grow
How
at the
far will
level.
that go out, Victor?
Say again.
How far will it go out, 3 years or 4 years?
You select that because you can
Okay.
put here as many months as
You
you
know, that's
want.
5 months, 5 years, right?
Yeah, yeah. You can put. Yeah, you can project to 10 years in the future of or 30 years in the future if you want.
And then you can download that into an Excel file, it looks like.
Yes, you can. Yes,
Oh, that'd be
yes, you
really
can.
nice for a lot of
Yes.
farms.
And it does. It's not very sophisticated, but it does some cash flow as well.
Okay.
So the idea original on this was actually to see, I mean, the question came about paying loans or making investments, right? I need to an investment so I can build a new facility and I'm gonna pay that much in the next few years when I would be paying for this, and then I will need to grow my herd alongside of that. I can buy also heifers here and put the price of those. So yeah, I think this would be very helpful.
Dr. Cabrera,
Mhm.
many herds have used bulls over the years, beef bulls. Can you kind of help shed some light on what has happened in the beef cow herd that has really made the benefit in our dairy crossbred market?
Good question. What? Let me see if I understand. What has improved in the beef market? I think, or maybe I can try to respond and let me know if it is out of what you were wanting. Uh, I believe a big factor has been the requirement, the need, the demand of meat in the market. There has been these big droughts, I think heavily in Texas and other big beef producing states. I think in the years 2008, 2010 on that timeline, and that prompt the need of having additional beef. And then there was the opportunity to do that also with, at the same time, coincide with the fact that reproduction was improving and there was additional replacement that I don't know if you remember, there was a time in which there were almost very low value for the heifer calves, and therefore the opportunity came to fruition. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was, wanting to hear. So if we've got a fairly small group, if folks want to just unmute and ask a question directly, we'll go ahead and just wait a second. And while they're doing that, I'd like to remind everybody I've put in to the chat box that we ask people to go to a link and answer a very short evaluation for the program. And it takes 2 or 3 days or a week for the webinar to be archived, but it's at the Dairy Team website, and those links are there. Do we have any direct questions?
Yes, Victor, this is Dale Thorson, and yesterday I was watching the Pipestone dairy heifer auction. Bred heifers, as much as 4 months off, were selling for routinely $3,200 to $3,400. Can your tool allow me to forget about beef, forget about some of this other stuff, and just simply raise heifers for surplus sale?
Yes and no, but yes, it allows you to sell them as newborn calves, but not to raise them, basically,
Well,
because that was not an option. Yeah, I would need a little additional calculation, I guess, on top of that.
well, it's an option out there, I think, that is really quite attractive. It doesn't cost $3,400 to raise a heifer to basically 18 months of age, which is where they were selling them. And I'm not talking the high end. They hit 4,000 at the high end, and those were commercial heifers, well grown. But I have difficulty not believing that some producers, and these were commercial, they're not registered, that some producers are saying, hey, I think I'm going to get back into the heifer racing business. Obviously it has some, that the value of those heifers has something to do with the number that are out there. And so we tend to be looking at the big herds and those who are trying to maintain their numbers or whatever, or expand or whatever. But what about that 300, 400, 500 cow herd, or even 100 cow herd, who says, why don't I race a whole bunch of heifers and sell them? And those big herds, if they want to pay the price, fine.
That's an opportunity, I guess. You are raising a very, very good point. The only thing I would add is, I guess this is a very dynamic market, right? We don't know how long this is gonna last, but I mean, I think in the short term there seems to be an interesting opportunity there.
Yeah.
To go back to your comments earlier, as the beef cow herd is at very low numbers, they're still not necessarily putting heifers back into their herds. They're sending a lot of them to the feedlot. This could stretch out pretty easy for the next 4 years, couldn't it?
Well, that's what yeah, maybe that's what I showed this slide, because I think that's exactly what they do in this. They do this projection based on the animals that they have. They use even weather projection models, and they kind of predict what's gonna be the price based on that for the meat in the future. And in the past, this has happened to be relatively good numbers of prediction.
Okay, do we have any other direct questions? Not hearing any. Thank you, Dr. Cabrera. Very interesting presentation. A lot of food for thought on how we produce the replacements for the next 4 or 5 years. So I'd like to invite folks listening to continue to be a part of our dairy webinars from Iowa State Dairy Team. Thank you much. And at this point, we will go ahead and sign off.
Thanks, Fred, and thanks everyone for having me today. Appreciate it.